The gate creaked as Lily pushed it open. Weeds had begun to sprout through the cracks in the walkway, and dry leaves had settled in every corner. The old front yard, once alive with daisies and lavender every season, now whispered of absence. She paused for a moment, staring at the house. The windows were shut. Heavy curtains drawn. Time hadn't stopped there because of nostalgia. It had simply been left behind. A soft breeze brushed past her, carrying the scent of damp earth and memory. This was the house she grew up in. Where she ran barefoot. Where her mother taught her the names of flowers. And where she also learned how to be silent around her father. Charles opened the door before she could knock. He looked thinner. His hair had turned fully gray. But those deep, observant eyes unchanged. "Hi, Dad." He nodded. No smile. "You got here fast. Traffic wasn't too bad." Silence. She stepped inside. The air felt heavy, like the furniture still carried the weight of her mother's final days. A vase of wilted lilies sat on the living room table. Lily brushed her fingers near it, not quite touching. I'm sorry. For not coming sooner." Charles didn't respond right away. He walked into the kitchen and returned with a glass of water. "She waited for you. Until the end." Lily swallowed hard. Took the glass, but didn't drink. "I know. She left you a few things. They're in your old room." Lily nodded but didn't move. She sat down on the couch, eyes drifting to the overgrown garden outside. "I still remember when she taught me how to plant rosemary in that flower bed," she whispered. "Died a long time ago," Charles replied, flat, unemotional. Lily closed her eyes. Took a deep breath. "Maybe it can still be replanted." Charles looked at her for a second. Then turned away. "If you want to try, the tools are still in the shed." He walked out of the room, leaving Lily alone. Outside, the sleeping garden seemed to listen quietly, waiting for hands to bring it back to life. Lily sat still. There was no comfort. But there was a beginning. Even buried in weeds, the path was still there. Lily's room was almost exactly as she remembered it. Almost. The faded blue quilt still covered the bed. Old books lined the shelf. Her easel leaned quietly against the wall. But dust clung to the corners. Boxes now filled spaces that once held sunlight and teenage dreams. And the air. The air carried a kind of stillness not born from love, but from obligation. She opened the window. Morning light poured in, sharp and golden, dancing with the dust. The room exhaled, as if it had just remembered how to breathe. In the corner, on the old desk, sat a wooden box tied with a ribbon. The bow was loose, as if whoever tied it wasn't sure they wanted to. She recognized the handwriting on the tag. For Lily. Lily sat on the edge of the bed. She opened the box slowly, like she was peeling back time. Inside, a collection of small, weightless treasures. Faded birthday cards. A bluestone necklace she got when she turned 17. Handwritten notes, the kind that smell like ink in memory. At the very bottom, folded in quarters, was a letter. She didn't open it right away. She already knew. She'd recognize that looping L anywhere. My daughter. If you're reading this, time has moved faster than I wanted it to. But some things must be said. Even if I'm not there to whisper them to you. The words blurred as she read, her breath trembling. Her mother wrote about the love that never faded. About how she understood the distance Lily had kept. And about her hope. That one day, Lily and Charles wouldn't just be in the same house. But find each other again. He's always been afraid of losing. So he hid. But he loves you, even if he doesn't know how to show it. Give the roots some time, my love. some only grow in the dark. Lily pressed the letter to her chest. She sat there for a long time, her eyes fixed on the window. As if she could see past the trees. As if the wind could carry her mother's voice back one more time. That afternoon, she came down in silence. She found Charles on the porch. Sitting in his old wooden chair, reading a yellowed newspaper. A glass of tea, untouched, stood by his side. "You read the letter?" he asked, eyes still on the page. Lily hesitated. The question caught her off guard. "I did. She wrote one for me too. But I never opened it." "Why not?" Charles folded the paper slowly. "Because I'm not sure I'm ready to hear what I couldn't listen to while she was alive." Lily stood there for a moment, unsure. Then sat beside him. "I read mine," she said softly. "It was like a thorn turning into a flower. You know?" He didn't answer. Just looked out at the garden. Where the dead rosemary still stood. A dry reminder of something that once lived. The silence between them was awkward. But alive. A space not yet healed. But open. And maybe that's where something could begin to grow. The next morning, Lily woke up early. The house was still wrapped in silence. But she had begun to recognize it not as emptiness, but as pause. Like the stillness before the first drop of rain. She slipped into an old sweatshirt and pulled on a pair of boots she found in the closet. Took the shed keys from the hook in the kitchen. And stepped out the back door. Feeling the damp earth beneath her feet. The sky was overcast, but the breeze was soft. The shed looked exactly the same. Dust, rust, the scent of old wood. Gardening tools lined the shelves. A trowel, a hoe, a watering can, stained gloves stiff from use. Lily gathered what she needed and walked to the flower bed. The one where the rosemary had long since withered. The soil was hard. Old roots crumbled at her touch. She started to dig, slowly, patiently. She didn't know what she was looking for, not really. But the act itself felt like exhaling. Like turning the earth meant turning something inside herself. She didn't hear the footsteps. But she felt the presence. "You got an early start," her father's voice came from behind her. Lily looked up. Charles stood with his hands in his pockets, watching her. His gaze was curious, but held back. "The ground's tougher than I remembered," she said, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "Got like that over time." "Even the soil gets tired," he replied. He crouched beside her, took the hoe, and began loosening the dirt. His movements were slow, but steady. They didn't speak for a while. Only the metallic scrape of the tool and the scent of fresh earth filled the space. "Your mother came out here every day," he said quietly. "Even when she got too weak to work. Sometimes she just sat on the bench and watched." Lily paused, eyes dropping to the turned soil. Her throat tightened. "She taught me to plant tomatoes here," she said, pointing to an empty patch. "They never grew right. I'd get so mad. She'd laugh." Charles smiled faintly at the memory. "She always said some things grow when they're ready. Not when we tell them to." They kept digging. The work was hard, but the silence, this time, wasn't heavy. It felt like a conversation in another language. Made of movements, memories, and dust in the sunlight. When they finally stopped, Charles stood up and reached out his hand. Lily hesitated for just a second, then took it. His hand was rough. Solid. But the gesture was gentle. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll plant something. If you want." Lily nodded. "I'd like that." He turned and walked back toward the house. Lily stayed a little longer, kneeling by the bed. She ran her fingers through the loosened earth. Feeling something stir beneath the surface. A soft, quiet hope rose within her. Like a seed. Not yet seen. But already alive. The soil was resting. But it was not dead. That afternoon, warm golden light filtered through the bedroom window. Lily sat on the floor, surrounded by open boxes and scattered photographs. Like leaves drifting in a quiet wind. Some photos had faded with time. Others still pulsed with the colors of childhood. She picked one up. A picture of herself, small and bright-eyed. With crooked pigtails and a t-shirt stained with paint. Behind her, the garden bloomed. Her mother knelt near the rose bushes. And further back, Charles was raising a wooden fence. Lily smiled. She remembered that day. She was 6. She had painted a stone with tempera paints and called it a protection gift for the garden. Her mother placed it in the center of the flower bed. Like it was magic. Back then, Lily believed plants could hear. That kind words helped flowers grow faster. That her father smiled more. But time passed. She remembered the years of thorns. Her teenage self, sharp-edged and stormy. The arguments with Charles. The silences that always came after. He didn't know how to handle her wild energy. And she didn't know how to scream in any language but anger. One memory came back, clear and unshakable. A rainy afternoon. She was 16, soaked from head to toe after storming out mid-fight. She returned late, bracing for round 2. But instead, she found a bowl of soup on the table, covered with a dishcloth. And a note. If you want, it's warm. They never spoke about it. And maybe that was part of the problem. Lily stood slowly, the photo still in her hand. She walked outside, where her father sat again on the bench. Watching the sky surrender to dusk. This one's from the day I gave Mom that painted rock, she said, handing him the photo. Charles took it. Studied it quietly. His eyes lingered on the scene. She kept that rock till the end. It's in the shed corner shelf. The paint's all chipped off, but it's still in one piece. Lily smiled. I used to think it brought good luck. Maybe it did. She sat beside him. Together, they watched the sky blush into orange. Charles's hands were stained with earth. So were Lily's. And somehow, that made sense. You think there's still time to plant something out here? She asked, gesturing to the garden bed. There's always time. If we're willing to wait for it. A soft breeze stirred the air, carrying the gentle scent of herbs beginning to grow back. And with it came something else. A memory made of peace and promise. Not everything lost is gone forever. Some seeds just wait for the right time to bloom. The rain began in the late afternoon. Thick clouds gathering like heavy thoughts in the sky. Lily and Charles had spent most of the day planting. Rosemary, lavender, and a few flowers Lily had picked from the nursery in town. The soil was still fresh, freshly turned. Like sensitive skin, not yet ready for rough hands. When the first drops started to fall, Lily rushed to gather the tools from the shed. Charles threw a plastic sheet over the more delicate seedlings. But the wind came fast. Bending branches, scattering leaves. Sending dampness creeping through every crack in the porch. Lily stood at the window, helpless. The sky unleashed its weight. Water ran through the beds, pulling the soil away. Burying the fragile roots. Nothing's going to make it, she whispered, more to herself than to her father. Charles stood behind her, arms crossed, brow furrowed. His eyes were trained but tired. The earth needs trials too, he said. Sometimes that's the only way it learns to hold on to what matters. Lily didn't answer. She wanted to believe him. But deep down, it all felt too delicate. The garden, the conversations, this slow reconciliation. Like a single storm could wash it all away. That night, they didn't eat together. Charles went to bed early. Lily stayed in her room, curled under a blanket, listening to the rain beating the roof like a racing heart. By morning, the silence felt heavier than usual. She went out as soon as the light touched the house. The garden was soaked. The seedlings had fallen sideways. Mud clung to everything, like an open wound. The bench was littered with leaves. And the painted rock, the one from her childhood, had rolled into the middle of the lawn. Lily sat down on the ground. Mud creeping up her pants. Her eyes full. "We tried," she whispered to no one. And still. Charles appeared, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He placed one beside her without a word. Then slowly sat on the other side of the garden bed. His feet sinking into the mud too. "You know what your mom would do right now?" Lily glanced at him. "She'd say it's time to start over?" Charles shook his head. "She'd say it's time to make mud pies. And then clean up the mess." Lily laughed, eyes still damp. "That sounds like her." "It does." They stayed there for a moment, doing nothing but being. And sometimes, that was everything. Charles took a sip of his coffee and looked up at the sky. "We'll wait for it to dry. Then we'll see what made it through. Not everything's gone." Lily lifted her mug, drank quietly. The coffee was strong and bitter like the day. But it was warm. And for now, that was enough. Two days after the storm, the ground was still heavy. But the sun had finally returned. Lily woke to the sound of footsteps in the garden. She slipped on a light shirt and stepped outside barefoot. The grass cool beneath her feet. Charles was crouched at the flower bed, examining each plant with care, like he was counting survivors after a battle. He didn't notice her watching from the porch. Lily walked quietly toward him. And soon they were both leaning over the same patch of earth. "Look at this," he said, pointing with a dirt-stained finger. "The lavender made it." The stem bent, but it didn't break. Lily knelt beside him, touching the tiny leaves with gentle fingers. "And here, the rosemary," she said. "It looks even stronger than before." "Yeah," Charles nodded. The roots dug deeper during the rain. "Sometimes we think we're sinking. But the soil's just pushing us down to hold us tighter." They looked at each other. No need to explain the metaphor. They both felt it. Charles stood and walked to the shed. He returned with a bag. Inside, a rustic clay pot and a young hibiscus plant. Its red blooms vivid, full of life. "Your mom wanted to plant this before she got sick," he said. Said the color reminded her of the scarves she used to wear when she was young. Lily took the plant in her hands. Its stem was thin. The roots, wrapped in damp soil. "Want to plant it together?" she asked. Charles nodded. They chose the spot with care. Right in the center of the garden, where the sun hit just right. They worked in silence. Hands side by side in the earth, digging, settling, covering. When they finished, they stood together. Dirty. Breathless. At peace. "She would have loved this," Lily said. "She's here," Charles replied softly. "In the smell of the soil. In the sound of the leaves. And most of all." He tapped his chest gently with his fingertips. "Right here." Lily smiled. A tear slid down her cheek. But it wasn't from pain. It was light. Like the wind that stirred the fresh petals of the new hibiscus. "You think this garden can ever be like it was before?" she asked. "No," Charles said. "But it can be something new. And still beautiful." They stayed there a while longer, watching the hibiscus sway, as if introducing itself. Flowers return. Sometimes different. Sometimes in the same place. And with them, life comes too. The afternoon dragged gently forward, when Lily decided to explore the attic. It was a stuffy space, scented with old wood and memories left hanging in the air. Cobwebs in the corners. Stacks of boxes, some barely closed. Light filtered through a small dusty window, drawing golden streaks across the room. She climbed the steps slowly, one by one, as if time itself demanded respect here. In the back, wedged between an old suitcase and a broken radio, she found a blue box. Thick paper, tied with a faded cloth ribbon. The label on top read simply, "Letters." Curious, Lily opened it with care. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes, all in her mother's rounded, familiar script. Some tucked inside envelopes, others folded delicately. They were all addressed to Charles. Every single one. And none had ever been sent. Lily sat on the floor, her heart quickening. She picked up the first letter. Dated 23 years ago. "Charles, you left early for work today and barely looked at me. I know you're tired, maybe even lost in your thoughts. But last night, when you held me in your sleep, it felt like everything between us was still alive." The letters spanned years. Some tender, others laced with quiet pain. There were notes about everyday life. Lily's first steps, her tantrums, her childhood victories. Unspoken frustrations. Unoffered praise. And above all, a persistent yearning to bridge the distance. "You've always been afraid to show how you feel. But I saw it. In how you'd pull a blanket over Lily when she fell asleep on the couch. In how you'd wait for her to come home from rehearsals, pretending not to care." Lily read until her eyes burned. One of the final letters was recent, written shortly before her mother passed. "If Lily ever finds these, I hope they help her understand that yes, we both made mistakes. But we never stopped loving. In crooked, quiet ways. But real ones. And you, Charles. If by some chance you're reading this, it's not too late. It's never too late." Lily closed her eyes. The attic's silence now felt different. Like the words had cracked open windows inside her. She came down the stairs, carrying the box in her arms. Charles was at the table, reading an old magazine, glasses slipping down his nose. She placed the box gently on the worn wood. Charles looked up. And when he saw what it was, he didn't speak for a long time. He just removed his glasses and rubbed his face with one hand. "You knew they were up there?" Lily asked. He nodded slowly. "She used to tell me she wrote, but never showed me." "Why didn't you read them?" He looked at the box like it was an old mirror. "Because I thought it was already too late." Lily pulled out a chair and sat beside him. She opened one of the letters and began to read aloud. Charles listened in silence, eyes damp, fingers trembling. And there, between all the things never said out loud, something began to stitch itself back together. Sometimes, it takes reading the words we never dared to speak, to finally see who someone has always been. The morning arrived with the scent of wet earth and a clear sky, as if the world had spent the night quietly cleansing itself. Lily came down to the kitchen and found Charles already up, stirring the coffee. Next to him, on the table, was a hand-drawn sketch on a notebook page. A simple wooden frame with glass walls. "What's this?" she asked, pulling out a chair. "A greenhouse," he said. "I thought we could build it together. A place to protect the more delicate plants. And maybe some other things too." Lily smiled. She'd always liked it when her father spoke in half-phrases. His way of asking without asking. Of showing without needing to reach out. The next few days were filled with hammers, nails, planks, and salvaged glass. The old laundry room door became the greenhouse entrance. Transparent roofing panels were installed with help from a neighbor. It was slow work, but steady. And each piece they built seemed to rebuild something else between them too. "You know," Lily said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "This is turning out way too nice for a last-minute project." Charles paused, glanced around. "Your mom used to say the most beautiful things were always a little improvised." Inside the greenhouse, they built shelves for pots, hung up old watering cans, and placed a small wooden bench painted soft blue, the same shade as the box of letters. On the first day it was finished, Lily carried in the seedlings that had survived the storm. Charles brought a basil plant he'd inherited from his brother. They sat side by side on the bench, watching sunlight pour through the glass walls, warming the space like a cocoon of hope and quiet warmth. "I didn't know we could still do something like this," she said softly. "Me neither," Charles replied. "But maybe it's just about starting. Even if you don't know how it'll turn out." Lily rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, their silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was full. Full of everything they had been. What they might have been. And what, finally, they were becoming. Outside, the garden was slowly blooming. And inside that small greenhouse, something new was taking root. Not just plants, but living roots between a father and daughter. It was late afternoon when the car pulled up in front of the gate. Lily was inside the greenhouse, rearranging the pots, when she heard a short honk. A shy kind of hello. She stepped outside and saw Will, her older brother, standing by the car, with a backpack slung over one shoulder. And that familiar smile. A little more tired, but still there. "Brought cheese bread from the roadside stop," he said, lifting a bag. "And that caramel spread Dad likes." Lily hugged him tightly. It had been months since they'd last seen each other. Maybe years since they'd truly talked. Charles appeared on the porch, wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. He paused for a second when he saw his son, then stepped slowly down the stairs. Will met him halfway. They hugged briefly, a bit awkward, but honest. "How was the drive?" Charles asked. "Long, but easy. And the house, still the same. Though maybe a bit more alive now." That night, they gathered in the kitchen. Like old times. Will told stories about his life in the city. His young son, the chaos of work. The good kind of tired that comes with trying. Charles listened closely. Lily watched them both with quiet affection. After dinner, they moved to the porch. The air was cool. And the sky was clear. Stars sharp against the dark. "I was thinking about this on the drive," Will said, gazing upward. "How we grew up here, surrounded by green and silence. And yet, there was always so much noise inside." Lily nodded. "Sometimes I think we left this place trying to forget. And now we're coming back just to remember." "Mom always said memory is like a plant," Will added. "If you don't take care of it, it withers." Charles let out a soft sigh, eyes on the garden. "She cared for our memories better than she cared for her own." Will was quiet for a moment. Then he stood, walking toward the greenhouse. Lily and Charles followed. Inside, Will looked around and smiled. This place smells like a new beginning. It does, Lily said, adjusting a pot. You both did the right thing coming back. This house. It still has so much to give. Charles leaned against the glass wall, hands in his pockets. There was something settled in his face now. A kind of quiet peace. Maybe now. We're finally ready to receive it. And there, between siblings, between potted plants, between memories that tasted like both childhood and future, something aligned. Not perfect. It never had been. But real. And more than anything, possible. Night fell gently. Like a blanket pulled softly across the evening, offering warmth without weight. The garden, now fuller, breathed in silence. Its flowers swayed gently in the breeze. Lily sat inside the greenhouse. A hardcover notebook resting on her lap. A pen in hand. Her gaze lost beyond the glass. Fogged by the quiet breath of night. It took her a while to begin. The first time, she wrote her mother's name, then erased it. The second, she scribbled a few poetic lines. But stopped halfway through the second. Only on the third try. Did she allow her hand to move? Without thinking too hard. Letting the heart lead instead. Mom. Today the hibiscus flowers opened. Bright red, just like you loved. Dad was the first to see them. He called my name from the porch. And there was joy in his voice. A tone I'd never heard from him before. Like something inside him had bloomed too. The greenhouse is full now. There's rosemary, lavender, basil. And the jasmine you once said would only grow if planted with music. I played your playlist. And wouldn't you know it? It sprouted. For a long time, I was angry. At you. At him. At everything. I thought silence meant neglect. That absence meant abandonment. But now, reading your letters. Watching the way Dad tends to the plants. I understand that love doesn't always speak the language we expect. Sometimes, it shows up in breakfast. In a mended bench. In a door that no longer creaks. You weren't perfect. Neither was he. But today, looking at everything we've tried to rebuild, I see that loving someone is exactly that. Coming back, when you could have walked away. Staying, even after failing. Starting again. Even when it feels too late. I miss you. But in some way, I feel you here. In the details. In the care. In the soil. Thank you for leaving roots. For showing us that even broken trees can bloom again. With love. Lily. She finished writing with tears in her eyes. But they weren't from sadness. They came from something else. A mix of longing and gratitude. Of loss and presence. She folded the letter with care. Slipped it into an envelope. And buried it in the garden. Beneath the hibiscus. Like a seed. Charles appeared a few minutes later. Carrying 2 mugs of tea. You okay? He asked, offering her one. I am now, she said. He didn't ask what she had done there. He just sat beside her in silence. The flowers around them breathed the night. And in Lily's heart. Finally, there was peace. Years had passed. The world moved at a different rhythm now. And so did Lily. She lived in a smaller town. surrounded by hills. On quiet streets lined with trees that seemed to whisper memories. Her house had a modest backyard. Nothing extravagant, but lovingly kept. It wasn't the old home, but something about the way sunlight touched the leaves, the way the wind seemed to call her by name, felt familiar. In the sunniest corner of the yard stood a small greenhouse. Simple, built of light wood and glass. A lot like the one she once built with Charles. Inside it grew herbs, flowers, and a few transplants she'd brought from her father's garden months before. Rosemary, a lavender bush, and a hibiscus cutting now blooming in vivid red. That morning, Lily sat on a bench beneath a trellis covered in ivy, watching her son, Noah, dig into the soil with his small hands. He laughed, focused, as if discovering the world right there, between worms and roots. "Remember what Grandma used to say?" Lily asked, handing him a seedling to plant. "That we have to talk to the plants," Noah said, solemn. "Because they grow better when they feel we like them." Lily smiled. "That's right." Noah placed the jasmine seedling into the hole he had dug, then gently patted the soil around it, like he was tucking in something precious. The silence that followed was soft. Lily looked up at the sky, clear blue, brushed with slow-moving clouds, and thought of her mother. She thought of her father, now living with Will. More peaceful, his garden full again. A new bench on the porch. She thought of the letters, of quiet mornings, of tearful eyes, and everything that had carried them to this moment. In this new life, the past no longer hurt. It had become fertile ground. And love, that quiet, imperfect, persistent kind, was now blooming in new hands, growing new roots. Noah ran over, holding a freshly picked hibiscus. "For you, Mommy." Lily took it in her hands. "Red," she said softly. "Moved. Grandma would have loved it." She pulled him into her arms, held him close to her chest, breathing in the scent of soil and childhood. And there, in a garden far from the old one, but no less full of life, everything continued, and everything bloomed.